You're listening to Foster Your Health Radio.
Hey, Dave Foster here with Foster Your Health Radio. Today I'd like to talk about melatonin and common pitfalls in its usage and offer some tips as to how to utilize melatonin to regulate your sleep schedule and also to avoid many of the negative metabolic effects of using the hormone. So of course, melatonin being a circadian rhythm regulator tends to prepare your body in the evening. It's secreted by the pineal gland in order to lower your body temperature and prepare yourself for sleep. It facilitates REM sleep, and it also would be secreted in higher amounts in an environment of darkness rather than the modern environment where we have blue light and the bright light well into the evening hours. Particularly blue light from monitors tends to disturb our secretion of melatonin. And so some people take melatonin as a supplement to counteract some of the negative effects of bright light exposure in the evenings. It's useful in that regard, and many kinds of light can interfere with melatonin secretion. Red light, which tends to be pro-metabolic, and it's a component of sunlight, and you can also mimic it by shining heat lamps, which are 120 volt or 130 volt lights, bulbs on your skin, relatively close to your skin, maybe a couple feet away or so. And 130 volt being a more ideal wattage, but I won't go into red light in this episode. So another thing that can interfere, of course, like I mentioned, would be screens. Now, just to get into how to dose melatonin, how to take it before bed, most people take it too late in the evening. If you are taking it for insomnia, you tend to take a little bit more. Of course, you can also take things such as progesterone for insomnia. But if you are taking it for insomnia, you can take a little bit more. 300 micrograms has been shown to be the ideal dosage, and taking more than 300 micrograms actually worsens your quality of sleep compared to the 300 microgram dosage, and increasing it continuously past 2 milligram and so on tends to lower your body temperature severely, and you need to have an elevated body temperature during the evening hours well into the early morning so that you can ensure sleep quality. When your body temperature dips too low, then you tend to not enter REM sleep as efficiently, and so sleep becomes less restorative and more debilitating. So 300 micrograms tends to be the quote ideal dosage, and most of the studies investing, or rather covering that dosage, tend to show 300 micrograms as more ideal in the elderly. Now with younger people, they can get away with taking less melatonin, and for them, although 300 micrograms may be necessary to induce sleep, simply as a circadian rhythm regulator, you can take, for example, 150 micrograms, so half of a 300 microgram tablet. And be sure when you take melatonin, it's often necessary to avoid some of the powdered supplements because they're very difficult to measure the amount that you're taking, and of course when you're talking in micrograms you tend to need extremely small instruments and very precise scales, and it makes dosing from these bulk powders very difficult, and potentially you're taking too much, which can negatively impact your sleep as mentioned. So given that you have a 300 microgram tablet, be sure that you avoid many of the excipients, also known as additives, in the tablet. Things such as silica, which can damage the digestive system and act as an irritant, not permanently damage, but act as an acute irritating substance and can lead to negative physiological effects and psychological effects. So avoid silica. Silicon dioxide and titanium dioxide, two other excipients, have toxic effects, but also in the modern preparations of melatonin tablets, they tend to also add microcrystalline cellulose, definitely a tongue twister. It tends to also be irritating to the intestine. It's related to wood pulp. It's actually a textured form of wood pulp, and so it again irritates the digestive tract and should be avoided, generally speaking. So again, taking these different dosages of melatonin varies depending on your individual reaction, and things such as caffeine that antagonizes receptors in your brain called adenosine, which regulates your waking alertness. Whenever you take caffeine or drink coffee, of course, it tends to antagonize these receptors, which means it opposes their actions, which tends to wake you up. And of course, many people report that they can't go to sleep after drinking coffee anywhere from 4 to 8 hours before bedtime. Some people drinking it anywhere from 8 to 12 hours before bedtime can negatively impact your sleep. Studies do show that coffee taken 6 hours or less before bedtime, so under 6 hours before the time you wish to retire in the evening, that tends to lead to more subjective interferences in sleep. So in other words, you tend to notice the negative effects of caffeine. So taking caffeine or drinking coffee at least 6 hours before bed, but possibly earlier, can actually reduce your need for things such as melatonin. Of course, things like sleep hygiene, which refers to lowering the amount of blue light that you're exposed to, and also bright light in your incandescent bulbs or fluorescent lights in particular. Avoiding those sources tends to preserve the secretion of melatonin. So using melatonin in those situations becomes less important. But in modern life, sometimes you need to drink coffee into the evenings because you have projects to work on, or you just enjoy it. And in those cases, then taking melatonin can somewhat counteract the effects of caffeine. However, taking more melatonin because of the caffeine in your serum will inevitably lower your body temperature and will carry into the next day, so you wake up and you can feel groggy and depressed. And you can actually become, in severe cases, extremely depressed. So if you have a tendency toward depression, taking melatonin can provoke things like suicidal ideation in extreme cases. And again, people who take more melatonin than necessary will find that if they drink coffee close to their bedtime, then they will need enough melatonin, whereby they will decrease their body temperature into the night, and they can actually deteriorate their sleep quality even further, more so than what caffeine would already do. So in summary, you should avoid caffeine as close to bedtime as you find that it interferes with your sleep. And when you take melatonin, 300 micrograms has been shown to be a very adequate and the most effective dosage, with more than that being harmful to your sleep. Avoiding excipients such as silicon dioxide, titanium dioxide, and silica, and also microcrystalline cellulose, another irritant. So again, experiment with these different dosages of melatonin, and keep in mind that taking more than you need can have detrimental effects, and even smaller amounts tend to be unnecessary if you take regular precautions for sleep hygiene and also avoiding stimulants close to your bedtime. If you do find that a higher dose of melatonin helps your individual situation, then taking precautions to counteract the negative effects on body temperature, the depression of body temperature, can remedy some of the side effects. So, for example, you can use things such as progesterone, which tends to elevate the body temperature, and also, of course, eating things such as salt, a sodium, so a soup or something that's nutritious and has salt before you retire. Things like protein, but not too heavy, of course, because that can stimulate your digestive system too much, so you don't have enough energy to facilitate REM sleep appropriately. And also using things such as thyroid, which, if you're hypothyroid, your body temperature already exists in a depressed state. You have a suboptimal body temperature, and taking something that elevates it back to a homeostatic, ideal euthyroid state will benefit not just your ordinary sleep cycle, but also counteract and will, in effect, remove some of the need that you may find for melatonin.
Can't get enough of Foster Your Health? Follow us on Twitter at @real_Dave Foster and join the healthcare revolution at fosteryourhealth.com. While you're there, be sure to check out our new merch. Thanks for listening. Have a healthy day.